All right, there we go. 7 o'clock on the dot. This meeting is being held via Zoom teleconference and is being recorded. I wish to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples. Tumtumay-Waiton or Belterra is home to an ancestral village of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. We are thankful to conduct our work within their territory. And before we proceed, I'm going to read a disclaimer. I'd like to make a public statement. Our village has an obligation to provide a safe and respectful workplace for our employees. While we welcome feedback, this should be respectful and treat our staff as each of us would want to be treated in public. Any potentially defamatory public comments about any employee of our village should not and will not be tolerated. It is contrary to the respectful work environment our council is committed to maintaining and which our staff both expect and depend upon. Unlike elected officials, staff are not in a position to defend themselves in a public forum, and for that reason, concerns are best submitted in private to council members and or our CAO. Any comments from the gallery directed at staff and considered by the chair to be defamatory will be grounds for that person to be ejected without further warning from the meeting. At this time, I'd like to call to order the regular council meeting of December 7, 2020. So the next item is approval of the agenda. There is an item on the table which has been added to the agenda. Will someone move to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Carolina and seconded by Bruce. And Lorna, do I need to explain what the added item is?
Sure, you could if you like, Your Worship.
Okay. It was revised. There was a piece of correspondence that was submitted by Deborah Struck by way of email dated December 1 regarding referendum with election and the response from Lisa Swarm, our Chief Election Officer. So we'd like the agenda to be approved as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion carried. Next item is the adoption of the council meeting minutes from November 23, 2020. Will someone move this item?
So moved.
Second.
And seconded by Bruce. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, motion carried. Now, we have no delegations. We will go straight to number 5, reports. I'd like to welcome Lisa Swarm, our Chief Election Officer, to outline the next report. Lisa?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I would just like to acknowledge that where I'm located is on the unceded territories of the Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, and the Katzie First Nation, and I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that. So thank you. There are several different parts to the recommendation that is put forward before council at this time, and all of them are to tend to different details that are required for this for the upcoming election. By way of background, in order to conduct an election during these times, it is necessary to obtain a ministerial order, which was granted on November 26th. A copy of this order was included with the agenda package. So after much discussion with the ministry staff to make sure we had what we needed, a review of the Local Government Act, as well as a review of the election bylaw that you have passed, these recommendations are put forward for your consideration. The first one is to expand the opportunity to vote by mail ballot to all eligible electors within the village. Previously, according to the legislation, it is limited to those who have physical challenges getting to the station, or they may have illnesses, infirmities that make it very difficult for them to attend the polling station, or if they know that they will not be in the jurisdiction on the date of the election. In order to provide a safer environment for people, by expanding this requirement, that anyone who so chooses to request a mail ballot will be able to obtain one. We will be using this throughout the whole election with that, and that even if somebody comes to the office because the it is a responsibility of the elector to get it to the village in time, which is 8 p.m. on voting day. We can use that to allow people to vote curbside as well. So we will be putting forward information, encouraging people to have this opportunity now if it is made available by your approval. The other thing to note in your election, this is regarding item number 2, is currently your bylaw permits up to 2 scrutineers per ballot box used. That could create a bit of a challenge if, assuming, let's say there are two people running for mayor and 2 people running for the position of councillor, that's 4. If each of them has 2, that's 8, and that's just for 1 ballot box. When we start adding that together and say we have 2 ballot boxes, well, there can be up to 16 scrutineers. Well, because of COVID occupancy requirements, which is 1 voter per 54 square feet, it would definitely reduce the number of voters who could be in the polling station at any one time, thereby creating a longer lineup, and it would be more difficult to get the electors through first. So the idea is that we limit the number of scrutineers to 1 per ballot box. And we will also make other arrangements to allow for scrutineers to get the information that they need in a safe environment, while also ensuring that the electors are carefully looked after. The third point is allowing for an oral declaration. As you may be aware, when you go to vote, usually you have to sign, it seems like you're signing your life away when you're putting forward a declaration saying that you're eligible to vote, you have not voted in the election.
Oh, you're muted, Lisa.
Sorry?
Sorry, we missed the last part because something happened to the audio.
Okay, how's that?
That's right. The audio
So-
had cut out.
Okay, and this was on the scrutineers?
Yes.
Number 3.
Oh, number 3, which is dealing with the oral declaration.
Mhm.
Okay, did you want me to repeat my comments with regards for the number of scrutineers per ballot box?
Yes.
No, just number 3, going number 3 forward.
Okay, so with number 3 is this will allow electors to make an oral declaration instead of having to sign the voting book. By using this method where they can orally declare that they're eligible to vote, that they have not voted prior to this election. This will minimize the number of contact times between election staff, between the electors and the electors. And it's one of the things that has become quite standard in the requests for the various by-elections that are coming around there, allowing for this oral declaration to ensure that we've noted what has happened. The election staff will note that the oral declaration was made. For item number 4, because of the timing with the nomination period, just so you understand that December 18th is when the nomination period closes, but we can't do a declaration of candidates until the following Friday at 4 p.m. And this is because it allows for that 1 week where they can get their original forms in, which means that if they fail to get the original forms in, then they're no longer a nominee, or they're no longer eligible to be a candidate, or that they may choose to withdraw without having to get approval from the minister. Anytime after that following Friday at 4 p.m., anytime after that, they would need ministerial approval to withdraw. Well, given that it falls on Christmas, on the 25th being Friday at 4 p.m., in order for that will be extended over to Monday, December 28th at 4 p.m. And that is because of the Interpretation Act, that if it's on a day you're traditionally not open, it moves to a day that you would be open. So subsequently, it'll be on December 28th. Now, usually the legislation says, well, you have to make a formal declaration that there will be an election by voting, or there will be an election by acclamation. We can't do that till we know what the list of the candidates are. If we delay making that declaration, that creates a whole bunch of problems for providing official notices. So this is just so you know what will be happening is that at 4:05, we will be making that formal declaration, be it an election by voting or an election by acclamation. Those details will be there on the 28th.
Okay,
And then for-
can I just interject for 1 second? December
Certainly.
28th is a statutory holiday.
Okay, we'll still have to, then we'll have to keep going until we get until we get to a day where you can't, where you would be open.
So, yeah, so December 29 would be the earliest that our office would be open because of the
Yeah.
stat.
I think the 28th is a day in lieu of Boxing Day, which I don't think
Yes.
that.
I'm sorry, Lorna?
I don't think that is a statutory holiday, Boxing Day.
Good point.
But we'll work it out. But thank you for that.
Okay,
We'll correct it if we need to, for sure.
okay, thank you.
Friday is definitely closed. We do know that.
Yeah,
Okay, and so the fifth item is because of the challenges with putting the notice in the newspaper as official notice about the election, and given the schedule for the Tri-City News and when its publication date is, which is only on Thursdays, we have a bit of a problem with the second notice that would be made outside of the traditional time period. So in order to compensate for that, the community charter does allow council to accept as an alternative publication in the newspaper, as well as saying, accepting that the notice would be published on the website, put on the public notice posting place, and also at the various bus stops, which I understand is your one of your traditional methods for letting the your citizens know what's going on. So that's what we would propose, is that for the same time frame that would have been required for just posting the two notices in the newspaper, that we ask that council consider these additional steps to occur at the same time frame in order for us to meet the necessary requirements. And I welcome any questions if anybody has any.
okay. First of all, will someone move this item?
I'll move it.
Carolina?
Second.
Second by Bruce. Any discussion by council?
Yes, so I have my little hand up.
Yes.
So on item number 3, ladies, first of all, thank you for your report. It's very throughout. On question on number 3, where the voter is going to have an oral declaration instead of signing anything, are we still asking? I believe we're still asking for IDs at that point, right?
Yes, and what we will do with identification, there's a couple things we can do because it is the official provincial's voters list. And that has been adopted as your official record. And what other places have done, they're willing to accept that as long as you're on there, we'll accept that you are who you say you are. With regards for ID, it's not a problem. We just have them show it up. We will be putting plexiglass between us and the electors in order for us to see that. What we will not be doing is handling their identification. They will just put it there. We will just note that's where it is. And that's for the electors who are currently on the voters list. If the elector wishing to vote isn't on the voters list, then we'll have to proceed with registering them, and we will take appropriate circumstances to make sure that they are safe and we're safe as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's my question for now. Thank you.
Bruce, did you have any comments?
I do. Yes, thank you very much. And Lisa, thank you for the presentation. It's just a question with respect to the second notice. So I have no doubt that we're following appropriate process here, but it just seems to me it might also help if we send out a village email notice in addition to posting on the website, because not everyone's going to go on our website. And I actually suspect the bus stops are the most reliable, but in addition to that, if we send out an email, that would probably be helpful.
Certainly, we can do whatever we need to do to make sure it's the information is provided far and wide. If you would like to, just so we've got it officially on the record, I would like to recommend that it be amended to include the subsection E by mailing the notification through the village newsletter.
I would move that we add a section E indicating that we will send notice out as well on the group village email, thus assuring that those on that system are made aware.
I'll second.
Okay, so any further discussion?
I think we need to vote on the amendment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what we'd have to do then. We have to amend the motion to include an Article E to send a notice out on the Village of Belcarra email list. Can we have someone move that motion, please?
It was moved and
Moved by Carolina and seconded by Bruce. All in favor of that?
Aye.
Okay, and none opposed, that's carried. So now we're going back to the amended motion. All in favor of the amended motion as including the Article E,
So
aye.
moved.
and none opposed? Motion carried.
Great,
How did I
yes.
do? How did I do, Lorna?
Great, very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
Sam?
Thank you.
right.
Did you want me to stay? I know you have another item that was added with regards for the election. So I don't know if you'd like me to stay for that, or I'm quite confident Lorna can answer it, but
I think you're okay. Thank you, Lisa, because we did include your response with that late
Oh.
issue. Okay, but thank you.
Yeah, I have one other point before Lisa goes. If I might, it simply has to do with, and we'll discuss it later in the meeting, but I'd like to know if there's any aspect of it concerns you as a electoral officer. Recognizing how challenging it may well be for candidates to go door to door and to host traditional all candidates meetings. I'm going to be recommending that we commit ourselves to providing technical support through Zoom technology, such as we're using now, for our community group to host an all candidates meeting. Now, normally we wouldn't get enmeshed in that process other than providing the hall, but I think we ought to, in this case, provide the technical support for a Zoom all candidates forum. I'm assuming that's not going to make you at all nervous, Lisa, but could you just comment on it?
thank you very much. These are different times. Clearly, we don't do what we usually do with this occasion. As for concerns, we're going to do the best that we can, and clearly this is part of what we're doing to ensure that there is an informed electorate for this. What I would suggest is that whoever is going to serve as moderator not be an elected official or a staff person, that you find somebody who would be willing to do so in order to enable it to happen, but also making it very clear with reading up front is that the village in no way endorses any of the candidates and is purely providing this to assist with the voting. It is also worthwhile to note that Elections BC, and this is information we will be providing with the candidates, has put together a number of guides to assist with how do you campaign in times like this.
Yep.
So that will be other information that we will be providing to them with that.
Okay.
So just,
Thank you.
we're good.
Thank you, Lisa. And related to that as well, normally people would drop brochures at doors in the small community. I think it might be more desirable that these be distributed electronically. I mean, obviously it's a choice candidates have, but I'm also will be recommending later that we make use of that same email and website of the village without discrimination to distribute what candidates provide to us. Now, I don't see us doing anything to modify that content, perhaps putting a limit on the number of words, but that would be it. Any comments on that proposal?
With regards for that, the only thing I would suggest is that you make it clear that it goes to a separate page, that it's not on the same page as the information for how we are going to be holding the election and the details that occur with regards for that. It's probably worthwhile putting a disclaimer saying this again is in no way an endorsement, but in order to facilitate the election in COVID times, these are the steps that we are taking in order to do that. So I think as long as you've got it segregated, and I may be speaking out of turn, but Lorna will tell me if I'm not in a correct point, is that as long as it's made very, very clear, this is not endorsement by the village, it is purely to facilitate COVID times, and that, when things get better, we'll be going back to the usual way of doing things, but there we go.
Okay,
Thank you, Lisa. That sounds really good.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Lisa, very much.
Okay, and if you do need to get a hold of me, Lauren, I will have my phone nearby if you need to call me back in for the, because
okay.
of the thing there, so.
1
Sorry?
second, Jamie Ross, I guess, just put his hand up. I don't know if the question is for council or for you, Lisa.
Yeah, Jamie's actually just raised his hand. Jamie?
Sure. I don't have a question for Lisa other than to say I thought your report was very thorough, so thank you. I'd rather ask the question to council. I think it's more appropriate.
Thank you, Lisa, for the
Okay.
report. Great report. And
All
thank
right.
you for your answers and insights too. Appreciate it.
Okay, I will be leaving your meeting now, but thank you very much for having me, and I'll see staff tomorrow. Bye.
Okay. see
Thank you for
tomorrow.
coming.
Thank you.
And she's signed off. I'm going to put the floor back to Jamie Ross.
Sure. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to make a comment in terms of what was indicated by Councillor Drake. And prior to that, I'd like to just to declare, so it's open, that I intend to put my name in to run for mayor. But just so there's an openness about that. But what I wanted to make the observation is I think it's a very good idea that the village would provide that technical support, given the COVID times and given the urging by the province and by the municipality to avoid face-to-face contact, to avoid things like even dropping things. So it's a way for all candidates, and I would hope there would be lots of them, to be able to get out there and get their message across in a very safe way that's respectful of people in terms of this time. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Desmond.
Oh, thank you. I would just like to add my support to Bruce's suggestion about electronic information. There are obviously a number of outstanding issues, that some of which are contentious in the village at the moment. So I think it's really important that we, the electorate, have an understanding of where the candidates stand on these positions. And so, particularly as the Barnacle is not going to be published during the month of January,
Correct.
I think to follow the practice, in fact, I believe that the City of Victoria has just done this in a recent by-election, of distributing candidates' bio and opinions on topics. Would be a very good idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Hmm.
Are there any more comments from the gallery?
Electronically.
I don't see any hands, so I'm going to ask, I guess we're done then. All right, so I guess we're moving on to the next item, which is 5.2. And I would like to invite Chris Waite of our engineering consultant, to outline the next report. Chris?
Hi, everyone.
Thank you for joining us, Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Yep.
Hello,
Hi,
Chris.
everyone. I suppose this is just a verbal report back to you, just on where we're at currently with the reservoir review, or sorry, not the reservoir review, the review from District North Vancouver regarding the fire flows or the potential flows they could provide us through their system. So to be honest, there isn't that much of an update from the district. I talk to them on a roughly a weekly, bi-weekly basis at this point in time, looking for their information. We're still waiting on their information at this point in time. They show me they are working on it, and I'm hoping to get it hopefully by the end of this year here. And once I receive it, I just need a couple of weeks just to wrap it up and get it over to you guys. So I'm hoping in the early 2021 we can finally get this report completed for you lot. I think there's probably more questions from the gallery.
I'm happy to ask questions.
I think you are so right. And so I'm first of all going to call on our counselors. Bruce or Carolina, do you have comments or questions for Chris at this time?
Yeah, I have an almost unlimited number of questions, so
Do we give you a time limit?
no more than 2 hours.
All right,
So-
well, I'm just gonna put it out there. I think we had anticipated that a majority of the meeting was going to be dedicated towards this for this particular talk. So,
Yeah.
just
Thank you
forewarn everybody.
for making that happen.
I'm happy to have Carolina go first, and I'm not serious about 2 hours. It probably won't take more than 30 minutes, 35 minutes.
Go for it, Bruce.
Okay, so with respect to North Vancouver, my first question is the Um, Are you able to describe for us the kind of challenges they face on that end? Because it's very easy on this side of their feed to simply say, we'd like to have a vast amount of additional water because it solves so many of our problems, Chris, as you know. Can you describe for me the type of challenge they're facing on the North Vancouver side?
Yeah, so what they're looking at right now, they're redeveloping their model and they're updating the water model for a number of issues. One of them is obviously just to see what they have right now, but they're also inputting additional what they might consider future flows. Future flows come from development. And so one of the challenges that they're facing right now is that they have a number of potential developments which will go forward on the North Shore. And so they basically don't want to back themselves into a corner of providing what is left within their system and then not have anything left for themselves. So it's a bit of this, how much do they really think they can have left over without impeding themselves developing in the future?
Mhm.
That's how I would describe that one. So
And-
right now, as of today, they probably do have capacity left within their system that we could probably get for not very much cost. Upgrade, capital upgrades, what have you. However, they're not going to guarantee it. I would suspect they're not going to guarantee these flows, and these flows might be removed in the future as more development comes online for the district.
Okay, and so I appreciate you're trying to project what they're likely to do with this. Can you tell me, in terms of their engagement, did you raise the possibility of getting a flow just when we have a fire event? Because I think, as everybody on the call knows, that's when we face our challenge. And so we're probably talking, 2 hours, hopefully every 10 years, but maybe every 3 or 4 years. And has that been raised with them? And do you think that would make any difference in their flexibility?
Yes, so we've had informal conversations regarding that, and even the existing agreement that you have reflects this as well, that they don't guarantee you your flows. They'll say, here's what we have available to you. And I think if they have the capacity, they will continue to have the same kind of agreement with you, that you can have what they have at this point in time, but they will not guarantee it during a fire event. It will be very much, if they have an event, you won't be getting the fire flows, they will be using the fire flows. So that's why they won't legally sign up to the agreement, because of the liabilities that's attached to it.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned before, that strikes me as very, very similar to mutual aid, right? Which all fire departments count on, which is provided 95% of the time, but 5% of the time your neighboring municipality has its own fire, so you're not going to get it. And that's just life, right?
Exactly.
On a small scale, it's the equivalent of an earthquake where nobody has anything. So, okay, that's helpful. I guess one thing that comes to my mind further to that is, in any such agreement, if they happen to be in a position where they're saying, look, we can probably provide X number of additional liters per second now, but we can't guarantee where we're going to be in 5 or 10 years, then I guess as a minimum, we'd want to get an early heads up that they were facing a transition that might require an investment. And I guess then we could well find ourselves being asked to contribute.
Yeah, so typically how I would say we would get prior notice to that would be via development permits, that we could have some kind of agreement with engineering that via the development permits, if a significant development permit came online, they would know, significantly ahead of time before that development was completed, where they start taking those flows. So, if it was a significant development, which would probably have to be to take up these flows, I would say you probably have a 2-year window from the time of being notified to the time they really want the flows.
And then there's obviously they're going to have to put in more infrastructure. And then our question would be, what's the marginal cost of tweaking that a little higher so that you can keep us on?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's where you'd enter into a mutual agreement that maybe just pie in the sky stuff of, if they had to upgrade their pipe to a 300 millimeter pipe, and we could say, well, if we kicked in a little bit more and made it 375, it would give us all of the capacity we wanted. What would that cost difference be? We'd be willing to ante up that difference. Yeah.
Okay,
sure.
I just have to interject for one moment. I know this is just very great discussion, but I'm sorry, Paula and Lorna. I had forgotten to ask to even have this item moved before discussion. I do that once a meeting. So
Second.
Moved by
Okay.
Carolina, seconded by Bruce. Any discussion by council?
Thank you.
We're
I
there.
apologize, Lorna and Paula.
That's okay.
That finishes my questions on that particular item. Thank you very much, in case others have comments.
Well, I think Bruce covered, I had the same questions. So I think on that specific item, I think I'm good unless you, Lisa, but I would like to address and see if Chris has any either answers or suggestion for us. I would like to address the Tatlow tank and how low it's sitting right now. So I don't know when is the time to do that.
Yeah, I've got a number of questions that go into that, but it's a,
We may have missed your question, Carolina, if you could state it again for Chris.
Oh, okay. I would like, I guess I have some questions around Tatlow tank and the level that is sitting right now, and if there's anything we could do from our part to up the level to capacity if possible, and not having sitting that low. So I would like to hear from him on that subject. And I don't know if that's the best time for it.
Sure, I can kind of give you a brief overview. You know, I can't, to be perfectly frank, I can't give you detailed answers because I'm not 100% familiar with Tatlow and exactly how it's set up. I know generalities of what it is and what have you. So the answer is, I know it fluctuates right now between, I forget exact numbers, 95 and 60%, something along that line right now. And so if you wanted to increase the levels all the way back to the very highest levels, to say 95%, one of the reasons that you don't think you can get it to 100% right now is because there's a number of levels and sensors which sit at the top of the tank. And I think you need that final 5% to be able to sit this infrastructure so it isn't submerged continually. So, you know, one thing perhaps you could look at if you really wanted to get that final 5% is make some modifications on top of the reservoir to be able to sit the infrastructure. So it kind of sits on, imagine kind of building the box on top of the ceiling. So maybe you could fit something else up there. You know, there's a cost associated with that and stuff as well. So it's a kind of a risk cost benefit analysis if you wanted to do that. You know, that's just one suggestion. I know when it comes to the 95 and 60% fluctuations right now, really, there's something I'm sure operations has kind of touched on before. It's to do with the water quality that no doubt comes out of the reservoir. And it's all reservoirs suffer from this. If enough demand, so a demand being, you know, people using the water continually, not just on a fire event, but to domestic flows, the water goes stale. And when it goes stale, it basically means that the chlorine level, when it's delivered from, say, the District of North Vancouver, I'm just going to pick some numbers right now, don't quote me on these, it might come over as one part per million when it comes over from the District of North Vancouver. But as it enters into the system and sits within a reservoir, the chlorine does its job and basically kills things as it enters the system, right? Bugs and stuff enter the system via, there might be slight leaks, there might be slight imperfections in pipes, whatever the case may be, hence why we chlorinate water. So what happens when it sits in a reservoir is that chlorine gets eaten up, quite literally gets eaten up by the bugs. And so if it sits there too long, it'll go down to zero, and you can't manage your water to have a zero because it means you don't have any chlorine left to fight back and kill anything that might enter the system. Right. So it's a long-winded way of saying, no doubt operations have dropped the level down to 60, because they probably feel comfortable that when they test the water later on, that it has what's called a residual chlorine count within the water, which means it's safe for you to drink. Now, you can inject more chlorine, maybe you could set up some infrastructure in the district to inject prior to entering the system, or you could inject it after it leaves the reservoir. And again, that's a balancing act, because you don't want too much chlorine in your water, because it'll be like drinking, swimming pool water, and that's not good for you either. So you want to try and keep it to these nice levels, which is typically, again, about half part per million, and above 2.2, I think it is. Off the top of my head.
Okay, because, you know, obviously I'm concerned about having that tank sitting so low so often. I do understand that, that if there's a fire call, obviously, you know, staff's gonna come in and open and make sure that the tank's fuller. But what I'm thinking is there a way to guarantee, well, I guess we might need a report, and you did tell me like about the chlorination, but to me, at this point, I think I want to find solutions to have that tank sitting at the highest capacity that we can possibly have without affecting potability of the water. I'll leave it at this for now because I know Bruce has some questions as well. Thank you, Chris.
No worries.
Thanks. So up next, yeah. Thanks, Chris, for the description. I do believe, in fact, that what we tend to have a very low level of chlorine. And in fact, I think most of our testing seeks to ensure we're not below decimal 2, which was in the lower end of that range you cited. So the first question, I'd like to come back to the question of the larger tank, because as we've discussed before, well, our tank is nominally 270,000 liters. The reality is it's only filling to 244,600 or so. So it's not filling to the 270,000 liters. And when you start doing your calculations for fire flow, which I'll come back to in a moment, every liter counts, especially with a small tank like ours. So the first question would be, is the tank, I assume, has the capability of storing 270,000 liters. You can't do that now because if you filled it to that point, you would end up damaging some of the sensors we have that fit into the top of the tank. Now, I don't know the details of that, but the question I'd like to ask you as an engineer is, could we have a look at that and see how feasible it is to gain those extra, what are we talking about 25,000 liters, which is no small amount of water given our circumstances. And I appreciate that this will be as you say, a cost benefit comparison. Obviously, there's a series of things we can do. Some are very expensive and have significant benefits. Others have less benefits, but collectively could move us closer to where we want to be. So one question I would like to see pursued is just the feasibility of being able to fill that tank up to the 270,000 and what kind of ballpark costs we would face in doing that. Then once you're there, and I know you did present to council previously doing some fire flow estimates. And if I recall, under the best conditions, we weren't that far off managing the sort of minimum residential standard that FUS typically likes to see, which is a 60 liter a second for 90 minutes as a standard. We've talked about that before. I don't recall, other than the agreement we got from the fire underwriters to have a mere 30 liters a second for 60 minutes. I don't recall seeing anything lower than that as recommended in most municipalities. Let me stop there. First, on my last point, would you agree that 60 liters a second for 90 minutes is not unusual in most municipalities?
That's a tough one to answer. I would say most municipalities would aim for that to be their minimum, is what I would say.
Minimum. Right. Yeah. From what I've seen, that's for for homes. It's not for commercial activities. It's not for even something, as you mentioned in one of your reports, it's not even something you would use for our own municipal hall. Yeah. Although I think if you went to a cost benefit on that, you'd pretty quickly conclude that you should just put a sprinkler system into our hall and forget about a higher standard. Mm-hmm. But so on that, then I think is it also true, as I summarized there, that even our existing tank under optimal conditions wasn't far off managing that standard for firefighting?
Yeah, I think under absolutely optimal situation, maybe I can change the conversation a little bit. I kind of said it before. You talk about the lowest levels. Again, this is always a fire underwriter survey. Those guys are at risk adverse, so they're always going to want to put things up. So You know, sometimes I would say, and I've said it in previous councils, you obviously have adequate firefighting facilities because you have insurance for the fire underwriters at this point
Yeah.
in time. You know, but it's always these other risks you want to offset. So, you know, we talk about minimums. Well, you've met the minimum because you have insurance.
Yeah.
It's
Yes,
just-
I don't think there's anyone has suggested that we're going to get a further break on insurance. The issue has always been safety, and the fire underwriters obviously they do their calculations against risk. I rather guess because we're so small, we don't get a huge amount of attention, but as far as they're concerned, they're quite satisfied to recommend to those who follow their standards that we're worth insuring, and worth insuring as a community that has a volunteer fire department. And as I understand it, we have the highest rating you can get if you have a volunteer fire department.
Correct.
Then, so having said that, I guess I would like to know, and it needn't be tonight, but I would like to know ultimately if we can get our tank up to the 270, then if we're there, what kind of range that suggests we would have in terms of duration at 60 liters a second. I can communicate the scenario to you separately. We don't have to go into those painful details here. Even my own crude model has about 7 variables, so I don't think we want to wander through that. But it looks to me like at 270,000, without having to raise the minimum excessively, it looks to me like we could manage at around 70% as a low level. Then, if all that's true, then my question becomes, how would we determine if that was a safety risk? What process would you follow to document the degree to which that is or is not safe from a water quality point of view?
So from a quality point of view, I would say that's a relatively straightforward way of measuring, because what you would do is I believe you probably already have a port there. You just have what's called a test import, which is basically a clean tap. The best way to describe it is you take water samples and you would test the chlorine levels and the bug counts and some other pretty straightforward numbers within the testing facility. And you just test the water. And if you get up to 70 and you keep testing and it's a nice even number and it's a number that you're happy with, I would say you're good. You don't need to invest in any other infrastructure. However, if you're testing at 70%, and the chlorine levels are too low, or you're not having good quality water, then you're probably gonna have to drop it back down until you get to the level that feels comfortable from a potable water situation. And again, you could get above 70 maybe if you keep testing, and you find you're feeling good.
It looks to me, Chris, and again, I'm an amateur playing with this, but it looks to me like we're not far off if we can get up to the 270,000 liter tank, and then can keep that at well, it's actually below 70. Let's say 70 as the minimum. That we would in fact have an hour and a half of flow in the event of a fire event. Now, and I fully understand on the safety issue. I mean, people can be killed by more things than fires, and we certainly don't want to cause people injury or certainly death because our water quality is too low. So, and given our track record as a fire department, of course, we haven't lost anyone before. So it's not life-saving, I don't think. It's probably protection of adjacent homes in reality that we're after, and it's preventing the spread into the forest that we're probably after, if I understand what the fire chief has told me about the reality of fighting fires, given the delay it can take before the firefighters get there to fight. There's no question that that's just a statement.
Carolina?
Thank you. So, okay, so Chris, so first I just want to make a comment, then I'm going to ask a question. So my first comment, I do think is important for us to master what we have, to get the basics right first, before talking about any other infrastructure. But on that subject, so you're telling me that, if I understood correctly, that having that tank the way it is right now, sitting, let's say, at a tiles level, could potentially affect the potability of the water. So would it be true, would it be fair if I said that bringing a new tank, a bigger tank, would do the same thing. And if you do bring a bigger tank in, would you need a chlorination station as well? Because in the end, you're just adding more to it and connecting to the system, right? So would it, so yeah.
Yes, is the answer to that, Carolina. Yeah, the answer is yes. If you want to store more water, you're going to have a way of keeping your water clean. So it might, it could just be a real large increase in your flushing of the
Oh, Chris, you got muted.
the reservoir. I wouldn't really
was
recommend
froze.
that because that's literally a lot of water you're flushing down the drain. Oh,
Sorry, Chris,
No, I know, I'm mute.
you had froze for a second there, so
Oh.
if you could repeat that.
okay. Yeah, I was
Sorry.
currently looking at my computer trying to mute myself.
No, you didn't mute, you
yeah,
just froze.
Oh, I'm freezing again.
No.
Am I okay now?
You're fine.
Okay. Okay. So I would say, yes, if you increase your level of water, you're going to have a chlorination station or increase your flushing volumes from the reservoir. In other words, drain the water out of the reservoir on a regular occurrence. That is not a very preferable option because you're literally flushing a lot of water down the drain, because you pay per cubic meter of your water. So that isn't something that we would typically recommend. Only in some kind of emergency would you take that practice on.
Okay. So yeah, so I guess, all right. So yeah, in my view, I think we do need to find a way to keep that tank at max at this point to try to find a way. But yeah, I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks, Chris.
Can I jump back in then?
Your turn.
Yeah, it's with respect to the size of the tank, as you say, as Carolina raised, the fact is from a consumption point of view, from a domestic supply point of view, given that we can keep the water clean by discharging this tank or having a low refill level set at 60%, would seem to me to suggest that for our current demand, it's about an optimal size, which is probably not surprising given it was the primary focus was domestic water when the whole system was put in. Because if you go to a larger tank, obviously you would have to drain it even further, or as you say, spill water from it, or heavily chlorinate adequately, which I think would obviously add an additional price to our system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would add price and complexity. And so I've spoke to this before. One of the things you kind of need to be a bit wary of is how complex you make your system. Is the level of it's kind of the level of operator you require. It's kind of like a mechanic type of situation that you have a really fancy car or you have a two-stroke motor. Well, they're two different types of engineers who are going to work on that. Sorry if there's any mechanical engineers here.
Yes.
That's why I would like in the water system. It's very, very similar. That you increase complexity, there's more moving compartments to it. It means that people need higher level of training and ongoing training and what have you as well. So just
and we're also in a more vulnerable position if we lose somebody who's trained, obviously, and if someone who isn't experienced is trying to take over or help manage the system. It does seem some of the fail-safe mechanisms in place now look to me as though they're wise because we simply drop back to a fairly simple operating system, and if we don't have a big event, we're fine. Mm-hmm. I did want to comment, if I might, on the option, because it does come up in these discussions periodically of shuttling water. As you probably know, Chris, we've got a Dutchman's Creek reservoir, which is not connected to our domestic system, but does have a hydrant down on the roadside. And it's similar in size to Tatlow. But I did have a conversation with the Chief Sharp for the Sassamet Volunteer Fire Department, and running his metrics, and I gave him the results that I'd calculated based on how quickly you could shuttle from that to a fire site. The end result is the equivalent of less than 4 liters a second at a fire site. And since we were earlier talking about 60 liters a second for fighting fires, it's fairly clear why domestic and static water supplies aren't a big factor in the protection of houses. So that raised another question with me, and I would like to know if there's anything that you could suggest here or think about with respect to that. Let's say we ran our tank down to its minimum. Now, on the Turtlehead fire, it stopped at around 6%. Now, I don't know if that's because we're extremely wise and we watch water quality carefully or levels carefully, or given that we really had very little idea at that time how the system would function under a big fire, whether it was just that staff were paying some attention and realized, my God, we're on the verge of taking this tank to zero. I suspect it was the latter, but I don't know. But let's assume for the sake of argument that at 6%, people are reasonably comfortable that if it doesn't go below that, we're not at any great risk of putting our domestic system in any difficulty. And just to be clear, if people are following this, the risk there is that you get to zero and then you can get air in your system. You also can get a situation with negative pressure where you begin to, if you don't have proper valves, you could begin to suck water into the system. And then you get into risk, of course, big time in terms of water quality. You're nodding. I'll take that you're agreeing so
that's
far
correct.
with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now my question was this: when I looked at the shuttle, if it's only delivering 4, and it wasn't even 4, but if under reasonable assumptions it could only deliver 4 liters a second to a fire, and even where we are now, assuming we're getting 19 liters a second from the District of North Vancouver, and we had to stop drawing out of the tank, and we were using 3 liters for domestic, which is more than what we used during the Turtlehead fire, but it's in that ballpark. It seems to me that taking that 19, taking out 3 for domestic, we're still got 16 liters a second in real time available to fight fires. And I would just draw everyone's attention back to the 4-liter supply that the shuttle was offering. That is 4 times what the shuttle can deliver. So even if that's all we had, if we had no more growth in the tank, if we could somehow continue to secure water at just the flow rate from the District of North Vancouver.
But Bruce, I'm not a firefighter by any stretch of the imagination. I kind of say I'm not a firefighter. However, I would make comment, but I think one of the issues that I understand what you're talking about, shuttling water, and you're going to be 4 liters a second. I think the issue there is, and again, I think when we had the the Turtlehead fires, was that the firefighters turn on the monitors to full, which got it to 60 liters a second. And so this isn't really about sometimes how much water is in the reservoir. It's about how quickly the guys are using it up as well. Good. And so it's about procedure as well. And I would say, knowing some of the history of the past about ex-fire chief, new fire chief, knowing the systems and all the other kind of stuff, I think in this day and age, the fire chief would know that he can't just turn the hoses on full blast and expect water to keep coming out of the hose. Yes. So I think that's one of the differences here, is that Jay is more up to date with the system and knows how to use the system now to its full advantages, I would kind of say. So when it comes to the shuttling, I think you could shuttle the water, but I don't think the guys would just use 4 liters a second. No. They would turn it on, it'd be 20 liters a second, and the tank would drain pretty quickly. In fact,
at first I should note that we do have some firefighters on. I think Doug Brain is on the call, so he may want to comment. But also that's exactly how the next fire, which was on St. Clair, was fought, using both shuttled water, I believe, but certainly preserving the tank, being cautious about its use, and then turning on high pressure when they wanted to, but constantly watching where the tank was declining to. And I don't think in that case it got below 30% during the fire. But I mean, every fire is unique, and we're just adding one more variable that the officer in charge has to consider. I'll stop just in case Doug wants to comment.
I've got Carolina with her hand up still. Okay. Did you want to comment before we move on to the gallery, Carolina?
Yes, I guess, seeing Chris's point, and I think the problem on shuttling water, which, by the way, there's a lot of municipalities that do, the smaller municipalities all over the province, they really rely on shuttling water. But, one thing that I can think of that would make that time, shorter, it's perhaps having a bigger shuttle at some point in time. And I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Okay. I don't have any hands up, but I'm wondering, since Doug Brain was asked.
Sorry, I just misspoke. I just want to correct myself. To have obviously a bigger truck that shuttles water. So then, you will bring more water, and it will, instead of going let's say 3 times, you might have to go just twice to get the same amount of water. Thank you.
Right. And from the water committee, we actually do have Ian as well as Doug. But before we move forward, I was just going to ask, we have someone that newly joined us here and they don't have their name on their screen. If the person who's identified as IMAC, if they would like to identify themselves and change your name on the screen, that would be really nice. Thank you. But in the meantime, we're just going to move forward and wonder if maybe Ian Devlin or Doug Brain wanted to make any response or any questions for Chris Boyd while we have him here. No pressure. Oh, I have Ian with his hands up.
I guess I've been volunteered to speak.
No pressure.
Okay, well, I think I don't really have any questions per se for what Chris has presented, because I agree with what he's suggesting. So I think our main issue is the information, what we have right now as far as making the decision on, as he explained, as you're sampling and the tank levels get lower, have we got documentation to support that we're optimized the Tatlow tank at this 60% minimum setting? That's really the issue that we're trying, in the water committee, we're trying to understand whether or not we can say that that's the accepted minimum for that tank and for the domestic flows that we have in the system. So that's the sort of the crux of the issue. Clearly, the domestic flows are not the same as the fire flows. So we have a problem of keeping mixing going on in the Tatlow tank sufficient to keep this chlorine level up. So I don't really have a question for Chris. I think we're looking forward to seeing what District of North Van can come up with as far as a potential flow. And then we could fit that in, I guess, or Chris would look at how that would fit into the existing system that we've got. I guess one other issue, which I'm kind of interested in Chris's comments, if he has any, we have all these road end, and they're usually set with a sampling station.
Oh, okay.
And I just want to clarify in his mind, these different locations running water would not be running water in order to increase the chlorine levels in the Tatlow tank. The problem in those locations is that they don't have enough residential flow to keep the water flushing through those road end pipes. And therefore the chlorine levels are dropping because of that lack of flow. Would you have any comment on that, Chris?
That could be one of the reasons, for sure, that the water's just sitting there. If there's a lot of empty houses or on the end of the roads and it's not being used up, sure, the water could go sour. I'm thinking, neighboring municipality, they have similar issues where we have a lot of dead ends in Ammo, and we implement flushing programs and all the other kind of bits and pieces, which I'm sure your operations do as well. There's some other things we could, personally, I don't like seeing water dribble out the system consistently. I don't think it's a very wise use of water. I think there's other ways of doing it. One of the ones that we're using in Ammo now is automated flush valves, which you kind of stick to a hydrant, and it has a solenoid valve on it. So it's just a simple valve, which will open up periodically and allow a significant amount of water out at one time. So then the problem you have when you only dribble out water, you don't really increase the velocities within your pipe. The reason you want to increase velocities within water pipes is because there is sediment and other bits and pieces which do accumulate in these pipes. and hence why you want a high velocity, because it gives a lot of energy in the water. It picks it all up and shoots it out of the end. So that's why you have these flushing programs. So that would be one way of dealing with that. Yeah. I don't know if that answered your question, Ian. It's
No, that's fair enough. Yeah, that's what I thought too, but I just wanted to hear you say it.
You're so funny. Bruce?
Yeah, thank you. I don't want to cut anybody else off if someone else wanted to comment.
Nope.
I just should note that we also have Jim Chisholm on, so we have three
Oh,
members
I
actually
apologize.
of our
Yes,
water committee. Yeah,
he's on
on
my
the call.
next screen. I didn't see him on this screen.
He was hiding, you see.
Yeah, no, I apologize. Yeah.
Are-
So Jim, you want to make any comments? No pressure. We're just, no hand up, but no pressure. If you want to comment. I have no other hands up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay, one comment with regards to the shuttling water. You know, we shuttle about 1,000 gallons at a time. That's good for 1 minute roughly when they put that monitor on to fight a fire. So, you know, really those tanks are kind of useless. So we can consider that, even doubling it, as you say, if you started, shuttling is so inefficient, that it's hardly worth having. Now, the other thing I was going to ask Chris, now we talk about the minimum amount we should allow the system to go to. It went down to the fire, Bruce is correct, somewhat like 6%. Now, if we take that into consideration, and I hear that in fact, the tank couldn't go to 55%. So if we take, say we want that to be at 10% at the bottom. So if you take 10% off the bottom and it only starts off at 55, we don't have a lot of water. Yeah. As far as being presented as a guaranteed amount at any time during the time, because we don't know if it'll ever get to 70 or 80. It could be at 55 at any time a fire starts. So we've got to use that as the factor.
Yeah, I agree with Jim that what we need to do is look very closely at the lowest level. That's why it's so important that our minimal level where we start refill be as high as is consistent with satisfactory water quality. One. Two, why we want the tank to be as big as we can, which is why I'm very interested in knowing if we can push it up to 270,000 liters. And most important of all, why it's so critical that we get additional flow from the District of North Vancouver. Because when you're doing these scenarios, if you can ramp up that inflow, it doesn't have a negative effect on your water quality at all, but it reduces the amount we have to draw, obviously, for firefighting, because we're getting some of it from North Vancouver. We're getting more of it in real time. So yeah, I agree with Jim. You really have to look at your worst case scenario, which is that the fire starts when you're at your lowest setting.
Okay,
Yeah.
the other thing I'd be curious as to what questions were actually presented to North Vancouver when you had your meet with them or talk with them? Chris?
So I can go back to my correspondence and send it back to Lorna after the meeting, but it was basically along the lines of what would the costs be associated with? I think it was 30 liters, 60 liters, and 100 liters a second. If you could supply those, what would it look like? What would you have to do to their system to provide those flows?
Okay, I believe in past discussions with yourself, did we not ask you to suggest what we should have for fire flows here? Did you ever come up with that?
Yeah, and if you recall, I'm I always bat this question back and say that isn't for the engineer to decide for you guys.
Well, I appreciate that, but because I suspect you'll take a look at the same tables that the fire underwriters use and base comment on that.
Yes, exactly. So that is what I use when I look through those different scenarios, you know, and it isn't up to me to decide for you on which level you want to use, the 60 liters a second, a 90, a 120. It's how you as a municipality see the risk yourselves. If you want to ask me what number you should have and you want to put me on the record, I'll tell you 240 liters a second. However, that's an outrageous amount of water because, you know, I'm risk adverse and, you know, I'm supposed, you know, my tenet is that I look after public safety and not for the cost of the municipality, right? However, that's why there are councils and other people involved other than engineers to rein us in and say, that seems a bit outrageous. Can we look at this instead?
We do. I just like to comment that, the council is left with that responsibility of trading the cost against the improved safety and reduced risk that's associated with the cost. And the councils do it all the time. I mean, we had a program and have a program in which we were looking at the danger here of cars going off the road. We're very, very steep sections of our roadways, and we put in some barriers. But this council, looking at its financial circumstances, stopped where we had gotten before. And that's a perfectly legitimate decision for a council to make. Like my guess would be, obviously, we don't want anybody at risk, but the risk of injury out here in Belcarra, yeah, I wouldn't doubt that one of the highest risks is going off a road on a snowy day or a windy day or a very wet day or where there's black ice. And so you're always making those choices. And I think council is the right one to finally make the choice on this once it knows what the costs are of the various options. When we're finished with questions, I have one more issue I'd like to raise, but I'll pause again in case there's someone who wants to comment.
One other thing, if I may.
Yes, Jim.
Okay, I think Chris at one point suggested that if we wanted to look at chlorination, was it not in the $200,000 bracket, Chris?
No, it's higher than that. I think the last chlorination station that my company installed recently, it was around $750,000. But however, there's lots of different ways of chlorinating, and some have less benefits than others. So it would be a review of your system, and then saying we think this is the right version of doing it. So I can find that out for you. Yeah, I remember in the proposal, the grant application that we put in, I put in for $1 million on that one, just to hedge our bets.
Okay.
Can you tell me, Chris, where was that? Is there a difference in terms of scalability on a system? I mean, was it a big municipality adding chlorination or something similar to us in size?
It was relatively similar to you guys, and I believe it was an injection system.
Okay.
Which is very similar to what Amor use right now, because it isn't just the system, it's the structure that goes into the electrical all the bits and pieces. So, if you want to, how best describe this? If you want to go down the route of chlorination, which wouldn't be a bad option to, you could basically get your tank to all the way up to the top and then just manage your chlorine levels by an injection site. It'd be a relatively straightforward piece of infrastructure that you can install and be able to keep your reservoir to the max.
So crudely put, that's one option at a cost of $750,000 that would give you both your firefighting and your water quality. Although I suspect we'd have a lot of complaints from residents who are not going to like the taste of chlorine.
No, that's a bit of a misnomer. These things are very, very sensitive, these chlorination stations. And so it would just make sure when it left, it would be at, say, 0.3 when it left.
Oh, okay. All right.
That doesn't cure your flow rate.
No, it doesn't. But what it does cure is the stagnant water issue.
I appreciate that. But I mean, if we're looking for a potable and fire protection.
That's correct.
Look at both.
But what you could do, Jim, is you could actually keep the system at 95%, 100%.
I would agree, but still, on a bad fire, that's still limited because we still only got an inflow of 19.
Correct.
And then don't forget, we got a domestic flow going from 4 to 6 liters at the moment, going out all the time. And there's no way to control that. You're not going to get that stopped.
No.
And at the same time, I understand we are actually dumping some water. And I'm not sure what the exact figures are. Maybe Stuart can tell me how much water they really are dumping per day. And that'll be taken out of the equation too, because you're certainly not going to go running around the village and turning that flow off.
Yeah, I don't think we need to get into that detailed discussion right now, but we could certainly provide that in the water workshop I'm proposing for the new council.
Yeah, anyways, I just want to make
I would like to suggest, Jim, relative to that, and as Lorna mentions, we're planning a workshop to deal with aspects of the water system, but I think it would be a good idea to include the water committee in those discussions where we can get into all of these details. I don't know if we're putting other participants to sleep on this call, but I really appreciate the level of detail we're getting to here.
I don't hear the snoring yet.
Okay. I actually have Peter Struck who has his hand up. Peter, if you'd like to make a comment.
Yes, I'll try and be brief. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, fine.
So the first question is, do we have a data recording flow meter on the output of the tank so that we can, rather than having, I've heard comments tonight of 3 liters per second for domestic use and 4 to 6 domestic use. However, there's winter, summer, day, night, et cetera, and I am just curious if we do graph our output flows so that we know, even if we had an average of 3 liters per second, it might be at dinner time running at 12 for all I know, unless we're recording it. And the other question is whether we have a data recording inflow meter for water coming from North Bend, whether we're actually measuring it or just accepting they're sending it, but are we actually receiving it? So I don't know whether we have that information or not. It would need.
Yeah, it says yes and yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when people are talking, Bruce Drake talked about 3 liters per second for domestic use, and Jim Chisholm talked about 4 to 6. Do you have any idea what peak levels of usage are, and any idea what the graph looks like?
Yeah, there's SCADA information on it, and to be perfectly frank, I haven't pulled the SCADA data recently, but it's, as I recall, it goes between the 3 and 6 mark. I think 6 is the max that it's gone to, and I think it hovers typically around the 3 liters a second. I'm sure maybe someone else on this call probably has a bit more information on the SCADA information than I do.
It hovers around there, but that wouldn't be, say, from midnight till 6 in the morning. It would likely be much lower. You're talking about at its highest usage, it's hovering between 3 and 6.
Yeah, like you said about the summer winter flows and those kind of situations.
And the other question I have is whether we're talking to residents about the fact that when they go away on holidays for a week or a month or 3 months or whatever, that when they come back, that they likely have stagnant water between their house and the water connection out to the road, because if water can go stagnant, it sounds like relatively soon, they might want to be warned to do a flush when they get home. Is that a concern that anyone has talked about?
Chris?
To be frank, no, that's not something that I've ever commented on. But it seems to me like good practice that if you come home and you run your taps for a couple of minutes, that's what I would typically do when I go to a vacation home, for exactly the reason you're talking, because you typically taste stale water as well.
I was referring to staff, whether staff are letting residents know that this chlorination, which is running at just the right amount, doesn't exist when they get back from a trip. And it's more and more of a staff question, a recommendation from yourself, which you've told us what you do. And I'm just curious whether staff has recognized that as being an issue as well.
And I'm just wondering if that might be the discussion with the workshop, Lorna, or do you have comments or?
I think that would be really good to be part of the workshop discussion.
That's a really great question. Really great comment.
I guess that would go everywhere, right? That would go for any municipality, I would take it.
That's correct, but I'm mostly mentioning it today in case I forget or I'm not around for the next major meeting. So now everybody knows that we should talk about it.
Thank you so much, Peter. And
Sorry.
Go ahead, Chris.
Sorry. Oh, I would say as a municipality, you always have to, it's great to put out the information, but it's information only. This isn't, I would really recommend you don't get public realm mixed with private realm. This is private residence and liabilities and all the other kind of stuff. Great to put out, information pamphlets and all the other kind of stuff. This really isn't a staff domain. This is a public information domain. And that's where, in my opinion, it should live.
Okay. Bruce, I saw your fingers up. Do you have another comment before we close off on this discussion?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for your patience. Yeah, just one last item. One of the things that the Water Committee has recommended from the beginning is that we establish a water system operations manual for the village. And I know off and on work's been done on this for some time. And I'd like to suggest that that through staff that we do engage Chris to complete a manual for us based primarily upon operating procedures. The issue being that if you lost one or two or all your potential operators, that somebody with the technical competence could pick this up and fairly quickly manage the system. But I also think it's important that we have operating procedures and documentation on the sorts of things that support our annual report, which I think is very good. So I'd like to make a motion that we do undertake the preparation of a manual, and as part of that, I'm sure the content of that, we will invite input from the Water Committee as to content they believe should be included.
I will gladly second that motion.
Your worship, I did talk to Chris about this matter today, and under his contract with us, he would be able to do that. So I think it's an excellent motion. Mhm.
Wonderful. Okay, moved by Councillor Drake and seconded by Carolina Clark. Any further discussion on that? Seeing no hands, I'll call all in favor?
Aye.
Motion
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we've kind of exhausted that. I see no further hands. Thank you so much. That was great discussion. We knew that we were going to be spending most of the evening on this point. Chris, thank you very much for everything that you brought forward today to the table. And thank you everyone for, even though you didn't have your hands up, somehow you managed to get a chance to speak. So that being said, I still have to call all in favor of the receipt of Chris Boyce's report.
Yes.
All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
And none opposed, motion carried. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, so we're moving on to 5.3. Lorna will outline the next report. This is regarding first. Lorna?
Yes, Your Worship, you might like to move recommendation number 1 to lift this item from the table, because it was tabled at the last motion, or at the last council meeting, pardon me.
Oh, okay. So this item was tabled at last council meeting. Will someone move to have this item table or lifted from the table? Is there someone move?
So moved. Second.
Bruce Drake. And seconded by Carolina Clark. All in favor?
Sorry.
None opposed, motion carried.
Hang on, are we?
Thank you.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about the report, correct?
Correct.
So will someone move the bylaw amendment for first, second, and third reading? Would someone move?
So moved.
I
Carolina?
will second. We're going to get to discussion, are we not?
Yes, we are. At this
Okay.
point, moved by Carolina,
Yeah.
seconded by Bruce. Is
Yeah.
there any discussion by council?
There we go.
Would you like me to outline the report first?
Yes, sorry. Oh, I lost that. I thought we did that up there. I had to move.
No,
that down.
that's okay.
My
I'm sorry. I
apologies,
threw
Lorna.
you off. That's fine. So I just wanted to say that this report was brought to council, and it only listed removing the cost of the sprinkler heads from the fees and charges bylaw.
Right.
And we were asked, staff were asked to take this back and to include the building permit application fee, which is $116 fee. This is not the application for the implementation of the system, which is a $750 fee. But these are the two fees that have been included in this bylaw, Your Worship.
All right,
So-
so we are at the discussion by council now.
Yeah, thank you.
Bruce, Bruce was talking first.
Okay, thank you. So if I get through the chair, can I just ask, the $750 implementation fee, would that be what many people call a connection fee, Lorna, or am I incorrect?
Yes, that is the connection fee. And I've actually asked Chris to stay on this call if you have any questions about that.
Oh, okay. My concern is that And I appreciate, again, as I've said previously, that the numbers are going to be vanishingly small, because I'm not aware of a large number of people who are not already on our system who want to add sprinkler systems or might in future. And the only people who would be eligible would be those who are already resident in the village, have an exemption from connecting, that are not mandatorily required to join our system because they have a functioning and safe well on their own property, and decide they'd like to add a sprinkler system to their home, but not make the connection for domestic water use. And I'd like to waive all of those. So I'd like to waive, I'm happy to pass this, but I also want to move on to get rid of the implementation fee as well. And my logic is the following, that we gain by this means additional home that is sprinkled. And if we could sprinkle homes in Balcarra for a cost of less than $1,000, because all of these added together look to me like about 900. If we could get homes done in Balcarra at a cost of the village of only $1,000, that would be by far our safest option to protect the village from fires, since sprinklers reduce deaths by a little better than 95% in the US. And obviously it's rather difficult to get a full house on fire if you have sprinkler systems inside it. So to me, the waiving all of these makes good sense. The only problem I see, and I stand to be corrected, but the only problem I see is that a resident who doesn't have to connect might put a sprinkler in at significant cost, have the connection fee waived, and then connect domestic supply inside the home. So we would have to know be notified when that happened, or be able to determine that it happened. So I guess what I'm really after with respect to the connection fee is deferral. You would still have to pay it once you connect for domestic purposes. And that's a modification now inside the home. You would then have to pay it, or if your home sold, because obviously now you've got a new homeowner and they have to connect, right? So having said that, I'll wait for responses.
Well, there were a couple of things I would say. I did find out from Connie that are approximately 85 properties that are not connected at this time to the water system.
Okay.
And and I'll have Chris talk to this, but there is the issue of somebody connecting just for sprinklers.
Sprinkler, yeah.
And it would be very simple, apparently, to connect to the water system without us knowing. And one of the recommendations, I will ask Chris to speak in a minute, but one of the recommendations that I will be taking forward to the water workshop, as well as to budget discussions, will be that the village start working, and if we can, totally get metering of the water in 2021. So that would be the only way that you could measure how much water was being used in a house in the event that someone who only signed up for sprinklering got connected to the full water system. But Chris, do you want to add to that, please?
Yeah, so there's another issue that needs to be looked at and resolved, and it's to do with the health code. Typically, whenever someone is allowed to connect to a municipal system, they have to decommission any well that is connected to their property as well, because of cross connection, what's called cross connection control. And what that really all comes back down to is, I'm not saying this happens in the village, but there's some small probability that it could potentially happen. So this is the reason, is that if someone's well was contaminated and it was cross-connected, there is a possibility that water could then enter the municipal system. And so hence why when someone is connected to a municipal system, they are made to decommission their existing well. So that.
Okay. So sorry, Chris, if I understand, is that, I mean, that sounds like it's a game killer virtually, because is that a mandatory requirement imposed by the province?
I'd have to reread the regulations, but that's my understanding at this point, Bruce, is that, it's quite a serious health violation to have someone on a well and connected to a municipal system. No, I have to reread that for you. Yeah. It's something that I've come across previously, that it's been a big no-no.
many years ago, I just need to wander off into an anecdote here for a moment. Many years ago, when we first arrived there, when there was no municipally provided water, we were fortunate enough to be on a shared system in this area of Belcarra. There were in the neighborhood of 35 homes on it. So it was fairly substantive in terms of the amount of use made. And those were the days when everybody imagined our water was absolutely pure and perfect. And we made a point of never measuring anything. So that seemed to be the case for all of us. However, one property owner, because we're on a little peninsula on Turtle Head in the middle of the ocean, of course, one property owner, everyone claimed to have perfect water, but there was a property owner whose water was very salty. And that party connected to the system. And I can tell you that everybody in the area for about 12 houses noticed they had salt water in their water. So I can relate to the risk of a spread. On the other hand, and it sounds to me if there is that code, I'm quite happy to pause to get clarification on precisely what the code is. I understand the need. I'm not concerned, frankly, about the use because we put proper meters in. We can always detect that a home is using water where a sprinkler system is only going to use it when there's a fire. So, that's the only questions I have right now. That I really would want to know the details on the health code, whether it's a recommendation or it's an obligation.
Okay, so I have Carolina has her hand up. Carolina?
Okay, so so I do have a question about the whole motion here. So I guess that would be to Lorna. Does staff know, or at least a ballpark, of what financial impact this would have on the village? Because waiving the 750 plus the 116 and all that. Do we know that?
Well, for the two items that are in the bylaw now, as it stands, I talked to our building inspector, and he felt that the waiving of the cost of the sprinkler heads was minimal, that it's probably about $150 to $350 a home.
Mm-hmm.
And basically that's for new construction. And I think he had 2 or 3 of those homes this year. And the building application fee would be per home. So again, as per each new home is, if a house is demolished and a home is rebuilt, or if it's a major renovation. So the cost for those two isn't huge.
Okay, so it's minimum. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I could just reiterate, if you take whatever that price we're forgiving and ask what would we be willing to pay to have a home sprinkled as a village, because obviously the homeowner is bearing the vast bulk of that cost, and recognizing that the beneficiaries are not just that homeowner, but everybody adjacent to them. And all of us in terms of the likelihood that our firefighting will get tested. I just think it's probably a bargain, but I accept Chris's point, the health code issue, we really need to come home on.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Chris
Boyd? Chris?
I was just thinking to myself here, one way maybe you can incentivize the sprinkler system, because I assume that's where you're trying to get to, Bruce, is
yes.
Trying to incentivize connection. Maybe you kind of look at a rebate system instead of connecting to the water system, and the village rebates back a certain amount of money instead for the decrease in risk of.
It might be tidy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point. Good point.
Along those lines instead to try and incentivize that. Because very frank, you want people using the municipal system as well. So it's a way of connecting more people to the municipal system maybe, and getting them to incentivize to sprinkle as well.
Yeah, it does. And it comes back to that core question I asked, what would we be willing to pay to see a home with a sprinkler system in it? And with your description, it's with or without these conditions. And I appreciate that, you can make life difficult in terms of complexity of your policy and processes. That and I'll come back to that a little later in the year when we get into the issue of encouraging people to have monitored fire alarms.
I have Jim Chisholm.
Okay, am I there now?
Yes.
You are?
Okay, Chris is right, of course, but if you get to the metering, you'll know if people's use are connected and there'll be flowing water. But with regards to the connection and a well connection as well, I would suggest, Chris, it's not decommissioning, it's disconnecting.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, yeah, you're right, Jim. Yes,
You're
it's disconnecting, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because I mean, we also know that proper backflow prevention, and you still have to have backflow prevention even when you have city water connected to your fire protection system. So if you have, you shouldn't use the word decommission the well, because you can still have your wells. But disconnecting the prop from the well itself to the house simultaneously, that is, you're right.
Yeah.
So that should take care of itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I see no further hands. Bruce, were you considering having this table for a further meeting?
No,
or are you wanting to?
No, I'm happy to take what we've got so far. So past this, and my suggestion would be that we add the topic to the discussion at the workshop on the water system, because all of this has to do with firefighting and fire protection, frankly. And I certainly take Jim's point. Sorry, I missed that. We've dealt with that before. He's quite right. We're not trying to decommission wells.
Exactly. Just not having hooked into the house. So that being said, I see no further hands. No further discussion. So can I call the question? All in favor?
Aye.
And none opposed, motion carried. So we can move on to number 6, reports from mayor and council committee representatives. Do any council members have anything to report on?
No reports. Not on my.
No. No.
My only report that I have is I've been in discussions on a TransLink meetings, and they've been very lengthy. At least, and I have another one on Wednesday, another workshop. Unfortunately, most of what we discussed was in camera, so I can't actually even report on it. But I think the report came out to the news today about the reasons why the TransLink, the Compass cards and stuff, and they couldn't buy, why they were stopped at the buying from either debit or credit cards and at the transit stations. So that came out. Other than that, unfortunately, I can't report on very much more. So that moving forward, we're going to bylaws. Number 7, there's one bylaw for adoption. 7. This is a council procedure, a bylaw amendment.
Yes, Your Worship, this is the change to have the council agenda package ready by noon on Thursdays, which means that the deadline for reports is noon on Tuesday. And after, if this is adopted tonight, then for our next council meeting, everything would be ready by Thursday at noon.
Wonderful. Will someone move to adopt this bylaw?
Removed.
Bruce? Second by Carolina. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, motion carried. Thank you, everybody. So back to the gallery means that you're going to get your agenda packets on Thursday now, rather than Friday afternoon. Number 8, we have correspondence. There are 7 pieces. Does that include Mrs. Strex?
Think so?
Yes.
Okay, will someone move to receive these items, please?
So moved.
Second.
And seconded by Bruce. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, none opposed, motion carried. There are 2 action items. The first item is a grant request for the Belcarra Barnacle Society, and that's 8.1. And will someone move this item?
So moved.
Second.
Bruce? Second by Carolina. Any discussion by council?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead, Bruce. Go ahead, because I gotta find my comments here.
Oh, okay. Just to say that I think Barnacle provides a wonderful service to the village. I don't think there's anybody in the village who hasn't at one time or other found themselves affronted by something that was in the Barnacle, but that's the nature of local publications, in my opinion. And I simply think if they're able to secure, as they obviously can, the vast bulk of their costs, I think it's perfectly reasonable that a council, whether it does or doesn't like the content of the Barnacle in every edition, should be willing to support it in behalf of the community. Thanks.
Thank you, Bruce.
Okay, so I'll make my comments. But the Barnacle, it's a fun subject now, but since I moved here, and I believe for so many of us, I've always been reading the Barnacle, getting the hard copies of it, and I always enjoyed the Barnacle. I do think it adds to the community. It's an asset to the community. That being said, I do realize we did get some letters from residents to council about the grant, about giving or not the grant to the Barnacle. And at this very moment, I'm obviously still supportive of the Barnacle, but I do want to make a comment. It's not up to council what gets posted that or not. I understand there is a few controversial issues in 2020 that some residents were unhappy anyways, but it's really not up to council. It's not it's not up to me to tell her what she should or what the editor should or should not post. And I believe if there's people in the community that are concerned about what's being posted on the Barnacle, to talk to the editor directly. At this moment, I will still support the Barnacle. I will support the giving of this grant. But I'm all ears for the community if they want to talk about it on why. But just want to reinforce out there that it's really not up to us what gets posted that or not. The only involvement that I see that council has with the Barnacle is approving or not the grant. So at this time, I am going to be supportive.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. And same for myself. I see most of they did present their year-end accounts as they always do. And I see most of their expenses come straight from printing, which is the hard copy that I think most people in the village actually like to have, that hard copy that they can put on their coffee table and read and flip through every so often. I know they're trying to get some support for more online reading. So those costs might end up going down in the future if we find more people aren't actually reading the hard print copies. So I think right at the moment, I'm just going to move forward, and I totally am in favor of this as well for this year. So at that point, is there any discussion from the gallery? No? I'm going to call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, none opposed. Motion carried. Good luck to our Belcarra Barnacle.
And thank you for all the work.
Second action item is regarding a letter from Mayor of Port Moody requesting support for a UBCM resolution regarding the flood risk mitigation. This is 8.1. Rob Vagmal, the Mayor of City of Port Moody. Will someone move this item?
So moved.
Carolina.
Second.
Second by Bruce. Any discussion by council? No. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carried. And the rest thing we have is the information items. The rest of the correspondence that we have. Is there anything arising out of the information items council would like to discuss?
I would just like to point out one item in 8.5, and it says, thank you for voting in favor of these motions at the UBCM. And I would just like to note, I think this is a standard letter that they sent out, but this year we did not have any council members attend the UBCM. So Belcarra Council in particular would not have voted in favor of these motions, even though they were obviously supported on the floor. I would just like to point that out.
Thank you very much, Lorna. I appreciate it.
Didn't vote at all, neither in favor, neither against it. So
They could have reversed the wording and said, thank you for not voting against.
Yeah, right.
All right. So were there any further discussions?
Yes, Lisa, are you going to touch on Deborah's truck letter? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I was waiting for you or Bruce to make any comments.
I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. So the item that the agenda got amended because unfortunately at the beginning Deborah's letter was not included, and we wanted that included because it was addressed to all council. And she was talking about the referendum and the possibility. Anyways, the reply is actually in the agenda now. And Lisa Zwarm, our Chief Electoral Officer, did send Deborah Strzok the reply, but I just thought I'd mention it to you as well. So Deborah had sent this email about conducting a referendum with the election. And as for that question, we're not in a position to add that question to the ballot at this time, since it's too late to incorporate that into this election. In order to conduct such a referendum at a minimum, and she was talking about sale of road ends, we would have to determine and approve the referendum question in advance of part of the election process, advertise for scrutineers for the referendum at the time as the notice of nominations at the time as the notice of nominations were placed in the newspaper, and request additional provisions to be included in the ministerial order required in order to conduct any type of election during COVID. And we've just received that order from the ministry earlier this week. And we know from previous discussion with the ministry that the ministry will not amend any ministerial orders which have been issued. So even though by-elections to fill vacant positions and referendums can be held at the same time, there's separate processes with different requirements set out within the Local Government Act. So while we appreciate the comments that Mrs. Strzok had, it was just the timing wasn't possible. As well, the questions were too broad. They were just too broad. They'd have to be more scaled down, and so that's the reason why if people thought we could have it, why we can't. So I just want to put that out there and make it a little clearer in case people hadn't seen the response. Paper down. And so that being said, no hands are up. So we're going to go right into number 9, new business. Do any council members have any new business to discuss? No, I do. Pick me, pick me. So I just wanted to let everyone know, and please pass this on to those that aren't here. I want to send congratulations out to our CAO. So Lorna recently received a 35-year award for membership for membership in the Local Government Municipal Association. So we're sending out pins to all the members who've received awards, and I just wanted to congratulate our staff.
Congratulations.
Oh, bravo. Congratulations.
And she wasn't the only one. There's many, and there were some people that received 40-year pins.
Thank goodness, yeah.
Anyways, that's a long haul. Way to go, Lauren.
Thank you.
I wanted to share that with everyone because I'm very proud of you.
It's very important that Lorna take the lead in that. So you've got at least 5 more years, Lorna.
There you go. Okay. Oh, I have Dave Goodman. Hi, Dave.
Hi.
Hi, Dave.
Yes.
I can hear you.
So I think this is appropriate under new business. One of the councillors raised the issue, and a number of residents commented on it, was that it would be nice if council coordinated or facilitated open meetings for the upcoming election. But I would like to see that council then authorize the staff to facilitate rather than just a single count. So I thought that should have been an action item, but no action was taken on it. So should action be taken on it in terms of advising staff to help facilitate that?
An open meeting. Okay, I think that was me, Dave. Because I was up at the hall and we looked and I discussed it with Lorna, if there was any way we could hold a forum outside the back door, because it's covered. But we'd have to know how many people would be there. Most people would probably, I don't know, we'd have to put up maybe an extra tent or something in case of, inclement weather. Lorna, can I put that one on to you about whether that was even possible? Because we decided it wasn't possible inside the hall, but because we've got outside and we've got an open area, and do we believe that Dr. Bonnie would approve of that?
And now I'm with the extension of the level of COVID restrictions today till, I believe, January the 8th, it would not be possible at all. There aren't any type of gatherings at all allowed.
Okay, thank you very much. And I guess when we were discussing it, and I did, Dave, two weeks ago, we thought that this was going to end today or tomorrow.
Right.
So, yeah, all right. But thanks for bringing that up. That's a great point.
But also a Zoom meeting then, could staff facilitate that?
Oh.
I guess
Yes, we did talk about that. We did talk about that once we were waiting for ministerial orders, which we got in between our last meeting and now. So now that we have that, we've talked with staff about having that. So again, I'm going to put that on to Lorna because it will have to be facilitated through, well, would it be through the staff or through the moderator?
We will, we agreed earlier, maybe Dave wasn't on the in the meeting yet, that the village will provide the technology. Our Zoom system has large capacity, but the coordination of it will be through the community association, and they would be the monitor of the system. We will just provide the facility via Zoom for them to be able to do that, have all candidates meeting. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, that was through Lisa Sorm, yes. They providing technical support.
I think, can I just ask, I think I'm glad Dave brought this up because we discussed it. Lorna, I take it there's nothing further required. It's just a matter now of coordinating with CRAB, who normally hosts these things. We typically have provided the hall in the past. Here we'd provide the Zoom capabilities, but you don't need any further approval from council to move ahead on that?
No, I don't believe so. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
And then the second item, which was related to that, was I assume you don't need any approval further from council in order to offer to distribute material in behalf of candidates, perhaps placing a limit on the number of words in their statements, but thereby helping to avoid the temptation to go door to door and hand out brochures.
Right, and as our chief election officer pointed out, we will have a special page on the website. Outside, we'll have our own section for election information that the municipality manages, but then we'll have a special page and section for the candidates where information may be posted by them as they would like. And did we talk about email too? I think we would use our email if required to.
We did, and she suggested, as I recall, a disclaimer that the content was not the village's wasn't taking any position with respect to election. It was merely providing a mechanism for candidates to communicate.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And I think Paula checked today and we have about 270 people on email, I think.
Which probably,
we do have good email capacity.
Yeah, that's probably 80%.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably 80% of the community by the time you take out the double cases and the fact that people would likely share if only one of them has the information.
Right. Okay, and I see Dave Warren is on. I'm sure he's hearing us. So Dave, I guess I'll reach out to Dave about that and through CRAB, and they can find a moderator. And then they will contact the village hall, Dave or the moderator, probably the moderator will contact the village hall to make those arrangements.
We're happy to help facilitate.
I don't know
Very
that.
unusual times, but.
Yes, it is. I don't know that CRAB would actually send out, as the village will, an email notices, because we're non-political organization, but they will absolutely, definitely host. Okay, and any other new business? Thank you, David. Any other new business? Seeing no further hands, I'm going into public question period. I'd like to ask the gallery if they have any questions on the agenda items for council. Please state your name and address for the record. This is always a quiet period because you guys get to talk all the way along. Okay, calling the second time. And calling a third time. No hands. I'm going to ask for an adjournment. Would someone move to adjourn?
Oh, Jim Chisholm has his hand up.
Oh, where did that sneak up from? Hi, Jim.
Okay, just one quick question with regards to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, fine.
With
Thank
regards
you.
to the sprinklers, Lorna, how's it going with our request for approval with the provincial government or whatever that agency is?
Well, I'm
question.
afraid it's going very slowly, Jim. As you know, the provincial government also had an election. And so they've only recently appointed the cabinet, and because of COVID as well, where people are working from home and it is affecting the provincial government too. It isn't moving quickly, but it's on our worksheet and we are working towards that.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good question. Thank you. I'm going to remove his hand. I see no further hands. I'll give you a second.
I have.
in case-
Yeah, I have.
Oh, there's your hand. You didn't put your little blue hand up.
I'm like, actually, I've got ink all over it, so I do have a blue hand. But
Go ahead, Bruce.
it just occurred to me that I may have missed it. I don't think I did, but we do have an issue, and this is our last meeting before the end of the month. We did have an issue of the expiration of a series of committees. Have we dealt with extending them?
Oh, we voted on that.
Very good.
That was, oh,
That was in the
Actually-
closed meeting, your worship?
I apologize.
Yeah, so if it hasn't been in this meeting, I would make the motion that we
No,
extend.
if Bruce,
Yes,
that was dealt with in the closed meeting.
okay.
There
And
will
it
be a
has
report
been-
coming forth.
Yes. Yeah,
A
because,
report will be coming forward.
yes, yeah.
So
Okay.
if I may just change the subject a bit. I would just like to know, because we heard a lot of concerns and complaints about the ward facility lid on the green waste. Has that been fixed yet or no?
Yes, I believe it has. Mhm.
Oh, that's great to hear. Okay, thank you.
That's good news.
Yeah.
I had a welder standing by.
All right. I guess,
So that's it. Can we now, I see no further hand. I'll wait another second here. And seeing no one else, I'm going to, will someone move to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Bruce, second?
go to the resolution to close the meeting. Did you do item 11, Lisa?
I'm sorry.
That is, we are moving the motion.
We're
Thank
we're
you.
moving to
Yes.
adjourn this meeting and
Yes,
go
thank
home.
you.
And everyone go home. So moved by Bruce and seconded by Carolina.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Meeting is concluded at 8:53 p.m.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
Thank you.
staff, for putting that agenda together and everybody working so hard. Thank you, everybody, for attending tonight. And now we just have to hopefully move forward and get our candidates out there. And
Yeah.
And we'll see everyone in the new year, if not before.
yeah, I guess we won't have a council meeting before then, right?
Right.
Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, or whatever it is that you celebrate, everybody.
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
happy holidays forthcoming to everybody.
Bye.
Talk to
You
anybody.
too.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Good night. Bye.
Night.